everybody, it's Emily Dark Schooling, and today I'm going to be bringing you an original tag, the Historical Fiction Reader Tag. I just really wanted to make a tag based on historical fiction to do during March Through History, so that's what we're going to do today. I worked on this over the last week or two, and we're going to see how it goes. I'm going to be the guinea pig and do the tag, and I hope you guys will all do it as well. It's going to be fun. So the first question is, what is your favorite time period to read about? I think I tend to gravitate mostly to World War II, Tudors, and Victorian, with some Gilded Age thrown in for good measure. I don't know. I feel like I'm pretty eclectic, but those are like my target time periods. The second question is, what book made you fall in love with historical fiction? I'm gonna do this focusing on my adult life because I've been reading since I was a kid, like very small. And I've always been a reader. So I'm going to focus on what got me back into historical fiction. I feel like it's something I've read my whole life, but I think I'm going to say this is the book that really got me into reading it regularly as an adult. And this is Mary, Queen of Scotland and the Isles by Margaret George. I own this copy now, but when I was maybe 20 years old, my husband's great-grandmother, I believe, let me borrow her book, and I think I'd started it when we were visiting, and she told me I could take it and bring it back to her next time we came back to visit, and so I did. And I found this just absolutely absorbing, very gripping, and I just couldn't stand that I didn't have more things like this, and that sent me looking at the library for what else is there like this. And that really got me reading more historical fiction. This is about Mary, Queen of Scots, obviously, and so Tudor era. This was probably the very first book I ever read about any of the Tudors. And she's more Tudor adjacent, really, but same time period. And so I found this just fascinating, and I just really wanted more. Question number 3 is, if you could write yourself into any historical fiction novel or visit any time period, what would it be and why? I have to cheat a little bit for this one because I don't have a good answer. I read a lot of very dark things. I don't want to go to World War II or the Holocaust or any of that. I don't want to insert myself into the political intrigue and dangers of the Tudor court. Even Victorian London and stuff like that has a lot of dark to it. So if I have to really put myself in a story or in a time period, I want to go live with Anne at Green Gables in Avonlea. I just think this is comfort and has the sweetness and innocence and just comforting place to be. And I just think this would be lovely to live there and just be a part of that world. So technically not really historical fiction though, because I'm pretty sure this was written to be contemporary at the time of the writing, but I'm going to say it counts. So I'm going to go live in Avonlea with Anne. Question number 4 is, have you read a historical fiction novel that was so gripping it sent you on a research deep dive? Yes, I have, many times, but I'm going to say this is my answer. This is The Devil's Arithmetic by Jane Yolen, and I want to say, I'm fairly certain that this is the book that sent me down the dark, dark rabbit hole of the Holocaust when I was about 12 years old. I read this, and then I just couldn't believe that something like that was real, and so I ended up reading so much stuff. To this day, I don't know, that's probably my most read time period, genre, part of history, because I just I'm always gravitating back to that. So this is probably the thing that sent me on the deepest of the research deep dives that I've ever experienced. But I did that with reading about the Tudors, and every time I read something, I want to know how accurate is it, and it always sends me on a quest to see did that really happen like that? So that's part of why I love historical fiction. Number 5, do you have a favorite or auto-buy historical fiction author? Yes, I do. and that author is Philippa Gregory. This is just like historical fiction junk food. I love it. I'll eat it up. I'll read everything she puts out eventually. And I just think her stuff is fun, fluffy, wonderful historical fiction. I love the political intrigue. I love the just like, I don't want to say romance. It's not really romance. There is romance in these books, but that's not the focus. It's just, it's great. This happens to be my favorite of the Philippa Gregory that I've read. I've still got several books that I haven't gotten to yet, but this one stands out as my favorite. And this is The Queen's Fool, and this is about a girl named Hannah Green who is Jewish and finds herself mixed up in the court of Mary Tudor, you know, Bloody Mary. And she becomes the Queen's Fool and is the only one who's like allowed to speak truth to her. And it's very dangerous for her to be a Jew in this time period and be in the midst of court intrigue and all. It's such a good book. It's great. Number 6 is, what is your favorite historical fiction movie or TV show? I'm not going to go crazy here because I have a whole separate video planned where I'm going to discuss this, but I thought it'd be fun to have this included in the tag because there's just so many great historical movies and TV shows. Like, that's my favorite thing. Next to reading historical fiction is watching historical fiction. And so I thought I would just tell you a few movies and shows that I think are worth mentioning here. So the movie that I think probably started my love of historical anything is Lady Jane from the 1980s, I think, and it's terrible historically. Like, it's not accurate even a little bit, but it's great, and I still love it. It's Helena Bonham Carter and Carrie Elwes, and it's just so good. It's great. And it's about Lady Jane, the 90s Queen of England. Her family sort of set her up as the queen when Henry VIII's son dies. And she really had no business on the throne. She didn't want to be there. But the movie is just so over the top, like romantic and dramatic. None of that happened in real life. Like, there was no romance. But it's still a great movie. I loved Titanic. Oh my gosh, that movie too really just like sucked me into the world of the historical fiction. Like, how accurate was it? Were these people really there? That kind of stuff. Just really love it. It's beautiful too. Like, that is a gorgeous movie. I'm gonna say Hamilton. I know it's not a movie, but I'm going to count it as, and it's really been the thing that got my youngest really excited about history, but it's just also really fun. I'm not going to be embarrassed that I loved the movie Braveheart. Still love it. It still holds up to me as a great movie. I think the first time I saw Braveheart was when I was 15, and I saw it in the movie theater, and it was just like the most spectacular movie I think I'd ever seen in my life. Like, nowadays, it's not as nearly as impressive, but to my 15-year-old mind, that movie was just bananas. It was so good and so beautiful, and the battle scenes, I'd never seen anything like that. And I watched it a couple of years ago with my twins, thinking like, this is the best movie, you guys are gonna love it, and they did not. And I can see why. It doesn't quite hold up as well to modern audiences, I don't think, but it's still beautiful to look at. And the last movie I'm going to mention, because I'm getting carried away again, is Black Book. And this is for a very specific audience. I don't think this movie is for everybody. For one, it's subtitled. They're speaking Dutch, I think. And for two, it's super violent, like so violent. But it's great. It's got Carice Van Houten in it, who I just adore. And it's about World War II and a woman who is Jewish and her whole family's been killed, and she dyes her hair blonde. She works with the resistance and infiltrates the Gestapo, and like, it's really great. Like, the political intrigue, the spying and all of that is just so well done. It's gritty and dark, and I'm obsessed with it, and I really want to watch it again. I just discovered it was on Amazon Prime, and I got very excited. So that's probably going to happen really soon. Those are some of my favorite historical movies. I think I'll save the TV shows for the next video, so we won't get into all of that now. Now for the last question. Historical fiction is often overlooked or underhyped in the booktube world. What book would you recommend that would hook any reader on the genre? So I have a few recommendations that I want to give you guys for books that I think would appeal to a broad audience. The first one is Lovely War by Julie Berry. This book is gorgeous, and I think this would work really well because while it is historical fiction, this is also got some fantasy elements to it because it's being narrated by the Greek gods. And it's very romantic. This is definitely more like historical romance than I normally would read, but this book was just done so well. The writing is phenomenal, and it's just beautiful. This is focused around World War I, which is not a topic you see very often. I think World War I doesn't get nearly as many books as World War II does. Next, I want to recommend Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. I talk about Sarah Waters a lot, but I think this would be a great option because this is more mystery thriller as well as being historical fiction because it does take place in Victorian England, but there's just so many crazy twists and turns in this story that I think I gasped more times reading this book than I've gasped reading any book. Like, there's just so many times that something happened that I did not expect. I want to recommend Homegoing by Yagyasi because this book was just so different from anything I'd read before, I think. The way the author uses time jumps, this book covers a lot of time periods because it starts around the 1500s, I think, when people were just starting to begin the slave trade and how that affected people in Africa. And you follow the split in this family between one sister who is taken as a slave to the Americas and one sister that remained in Africa and her family's experiences staying in Africa and how these family members diverge through time. It's just really interesting. Each character's voice is very distinct and it's beautifully written, and I just think this is one of those books that I think everyone should pick up. I want to recommend The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This does not feel like historical fiction, I think, and I think this would be the easiest gateway book to entice someone to start reading more historical fiction. This has to do with Hollywood and like the golden age, like the 50s and 60s through, I think, the 80s, and it's just really well done. This book felt like a memoir more than a novel, and I am sad that I can't go look up these movies that were talked about because I feel like they must be real. They're written to feel so realistic, and I just think this book is so well done and very readable and very good. Only two left. I have We Are Not Free by Tracy Chee. I've been like talking about this constantly, so I'm not going to go too deep, but this book is great. And again, it doesn't feel as much like historical fiction. You're following a friend group of Japanese American teenagers as they are living through Japanese internment during World War II and how it's affecting each of them and their families, and just, it's so good. This book is so good. Like, I can't even, I want everyone to read this because it's beautifully written and so moving, and I cried, and I just, this book is great. And the last book I want to recommend is Fatal Throne, The Wives of Henry VIII Tell All, and this is by a variety of young adult authors. And I think stuff like this is a great way to kind of test out a time period. This is so much fun, and I feel like each author took on their wife in such a way that they felt like real people, and I think this book gives them each the justice they deserve. I even enjoyed Jane's chapter, and Jane Seymour, as I would have always said, is the most boring of Henry's wives because she didn't really do anything except have a son and die, but she's written in this book in a way that, like, I actually found her interesting and cared about her, and so this book is so much fun to read. We have some really great authors involved in this too. Jennifer Donnelly has a chapter. Linda Sue Park has a chapter. So Candace Fleming. So there's some really great authors in here, and I just think this book is a lot of fun. And it's a great way to dip your toes into a time period you might not have experienced before. So that is it for this tag. I hope you guys will all do it because I'm excited. I'm not tagging anybody, but I hope you all just take it and run with it and make your own videos. I can't wait to see everybody's videos for this tag. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. Happy reading. Bye.